Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Advocacy and Hope Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Post. I really appreciate everybody being here. Number one, I always thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys taking a little bit of the opportunity during your day to be live or watch it afterwards when it's recorded. Advocacy and Hope is something that I developed last fall in the midst of the probably worst trauma and disaster of my life, and really trying to look for hope and joy and love and just sharing things with others, but then really diving deep in how can we advocate for ourselves and others. When I launched my book in May of this year, it was one of the most pivotal, therapeutic, just monumental things that I've ever done. And this podcast has lent me so many amazing guests. And today's guest is one that I have really reached out to for many, many months. Our schedules really just weren't coming together. And finally, I can have him on the show. Today's going to be a really positive day. And I think that, Mondays are one of those things. I've told you guys I need positivity on Mondays. And I think that we need to just really kind of wrap our hands around the community, have something positive, and just be able to start that week off well. So I am super excited to have you on the show, John. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amy. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. So John Israel is my guest. He is an entrepreneur, husband, father, speaker, and one of my most favorite things to say is he's the founder of Mr. Thank You. And when I discovered John, and it was through a friend, and really kind of stalking on the internet and being like, who are you? What do you do? Your mission makes me happy. It makes me smile. And I think it'll make many more smile and really just find that gratitude and positivity in their day. So I can't wait to really just dive in. So John, if you want to give us just an overview of kind of who you are and how this started. And then, really just, I'm so thrilled to talk about Mr. Thank You because of that gratitude and just how it makes us, or should make us all, feel each day.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a little bit of intel of where we are now and how this journey all began. But so I live in Blue Ridge, Texas, which is in the outskirts of Dallas. We have 6 acres. We've got 66 chickens, 4 dogs, 6 cats, and 4 kids. And I'm still married through all of it. It's been an amazing journey to get here. This is kind of always our dream, was to be on a farm, and that actually really lends itself to kind of often how I'll end one of my speeches, which is with a very powerful question, which is, how do you treat that for which you are grateful? Because when I first started this journey, so just to clarify, Mr. Thank You started off as a strategic gifting firm. So we work with real estate companies, mortgage companies, very similar with how our friend John Ruland did, and we would help them build a gifting strategy for how they would love on and appreciate their most important relationships. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. And then it got to a point where, just like any business you're in or any sales career, you get burnt out. And in 2016, I was overworked, overwhelmed, and so unhappy. I was ready to walk away from all of it, everything I'd spent my career building. And it wasn't until I came home one day, and this is really, it's this really wild image, because my wife was sitting on our couch. We only had one child at the time. So she was nursing our infant son in one arm and handwriting thank you cards in the other hand to the people who had supported her during her pregnancy.
Wow.
And objectively speaking, it was one of the most beautiful images of my life. But what I actually felt was resentment, because I thought, this isn't fair. I am out here working my ass off, meeting clients, building this business. She gets to be here by herself and be all happy and go lucky and relax with our baby. And it was this awful thought, but I felt it.
Yep.
And it was as if God spoke to me in that moment and said, John, if you can't appreciate what you have now, who's to say you'll be any happier when you finally get what you say you want?
Wow.
That was a moment that gave me a step back to look at how great my life actually is. I mean, I had everything I ever said I wanted. I was married. We bought our first house. We had our first child. I had a successful business. It wasn't like we were losing money or anything, but it wasn't enough. And that's when I realized that I had a problem, and I didn't have a name for it at the time, but I do now. It's called perpetual discontentment. Perpetual discontentment, the never ending feeling that what isn't enough.
Yep.
And most entrepreneurs, most business people that I meet, in fact, probably just about every human, at least if you live in the Western culture, suffers from perpetual discontentment as well. But It's not always a bad thing, right? Because if we're never fully satisfied with what we have, what are we going to do? We're going to make it better. We're going to work on systems and processes and procedures. And we're going to get better and improve and create better quality of life and all these different things. But at the end of the day, if we're not careful and this gets out of hand, perpetual discontentment will also prevent us from ever truly enjoying this life that we're working so hard to create. So I realized something needed to change. Fast forward a little bit, I had a business coach I was working with, and I shared this breakdown. And so he really challenged me to start living out my values. And, here I am, this gratitude salesman. I was the irony of ironies. I'm the most ungrateful gratitude salesman on planet Earth, right? And so we took this idea and really dove into it and said, well, what if we made a project around gratitude for you to embody every single day for a year to really live this idea out? And so it sounds really simple, but he said, what's a moment that you remember seeing or experiencing pure and authentic gratitude? Wow. And I give my wife credit for that, because I remember what was interesting. She was in her own gratitude project. It wasn't a particular time frame. She just had this abundance of thank you cards she had been collecting. And finally, when she semi-retired after having our first child, she was like, I'm going to spend my maternity leave writing thank you cards. It was really beautiful. But she was actually so patient, so kind. I actually saw it affect her emotionally in a very positive way. And I also noticed how it was affecting her relationships, because I remember going to an event and bumping into one of our mutual friends, John Vroman, who my wife and his wife are friends. And John came up to me and was like, oh my gosh, John, that letter your wife sent us is a highlight of the year. It was so pure, authentic, unasked for, and it was just genuine. And I just want to say thank you so much. So I was receiving benefit from the gratitude my wife was sending out. And I was like, okay, there's something here. What can I do? So that started this idea of what became known as the Mr. Thank You Project. And that was a year-long commitment where I would handwrite 5 thank you cards every day for 365 consecutive days. There were 4 rules. So 5 cards had to be handwritten every single day, no matter what. Had to be handwritten, couldn't be a text or a video. 2, I every day reset at 0. So I couldn't skip 3 days and then do 15 in a day or 20 in a day. Because if something's a true habit, you literally need to do it every day. 3rd rule was I could write a max of 3 cards per any one person. And this is because I know myself, and if I couldn't think of somebody to write a card to, I might write the 75th thank you card to my mother, which who knows, maybe she would have appreciated that. But I thought if they kept going to the same people, they would start to lose their luster and their impact. So 3 people, 3 cards per person max. The 4th rule was an interesting one. This is around accountability. And so my coach asked me, he says, hey, so John, where's the accountability on this? What happens if or when you miss a day? And I thought about it. I thought I had a good answer. And I said, for every day that I miss, I'm going to donate $100 to charity. Felt pretty good about that. And he looks at me and says, add a 0. And so I said, excuse me, you want me to donate $1,000 every day that I don't get to writing my 5 thank you cards? That's crazy. He says, well, John, I don't want you to have to donate any money, but let me ask you this. How likely is it that you're going to donate $100 or several $100s to charities this year anyways? I said, yeah, we kind of do that with our tithing process. He says, okay, then you're giving yourself a way out. If what's at stake every day is $1,000, how many days will you miss? I mean, none. There's no way I'm going to miss a day. So then he says, okay, then what would you like to do? So the 4th and final rule of the project was $1,000 to charity for any and every day that I didn't write my 5 thank you cards. And when you do the math on it, 5 cards times 365 days is 1,825 letters of appreciation in 1 year's time. And you don't need to know everything that happened to realize that if you made a commitment like that to express love, gratitude, and appreciation every day, multiple times a day to different people, you would be a different person by the end of that year. It would alter your relationships, your marriage, your business, and all of those things happened. So ultimately it turned into a book, and then I gave a TED Talk on it. And now I speak to companies and corporations about gratitude as a competitive advantage.
Wow. There's a lot we can take away from that. I think, I can just see this impacting so many people, and I'm sure you have seen the impact and just the ripple effect across, so many areas of people that maybe were already there and maybe, doing this every once in a while, and maybe they found it as a challenge. And maybe, I don't know if you found other people that weren't doing this at all. And let me ask you this. So I could just talk because it's super exciting, but what was the response from the majority? I mean, if you sent 1,825 letters out in 1 year, you had a lot of, probably, I always go on clinical trials, you've got a lot of response there. What was happening? What was coming back to you? And then how did you feel about what was coming back to you?
So this actually brings up an interesting stat. So I'll ask you this: what percentage? So out of 1,800 thank you cards, what percentage do you think responded back to say anything or acknowledge their card or thank me back? What do you think?
Dang, I mean, I'm a thank you letter girl. I have thank you letters in beautiful buckets under my desk. Like, that's who I am. So I like gel with you. You're my people. I mean, I could get this really right. I could get this really wrong. God, I want to say maybe 1,500.
10%.
What?
10%. So about 180 to 85-ish people, approximately. Crazy,
Wow.
right? Crazy, right?
Wow.
So that actually became, it's a whole chapter in the book about that topic. And this was a really fascinating breakdown. So now I don't want to deflate the responses, because some of the responses were phenomenal. I mean, 180 plus, that's still one every other day. Like that's good. But it was a fascinating thing. And also that even played into my family. So I wrote them to my mom, my dad, my siblings, their spouses and significant others, and same stat, like 10% responded. Which we could talk about why a little later. It's a really interesting story about my mom with that. But here was one of the takeaways that I learned, is that you don't need to receive a thank you from a thank you card, because ultimately here's what happens. I wrote a blog about this because it started to become a challenge when I would notice. So let's define the word generosity for a second. So generosity is when something is given freely without expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
And if you were to ask most people, hey, would you consider yourself a generous person? I think most people would say, yeah, I'm pretty generous when I can. And when I have extra money, I like to give it, or time, or things like that. Well, tell me if you can relate with this at all, Amy. But so I run a gifting agency. And one of the things that upsets one of my clients more than anything is if they spend really good money on a gift and then they give it out to somebody and the other person doesn't say anything. Have you ever experienced that, by the way, with like a birthday gift, a wedding gift, anything like that? Have you ever had that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So the emotions we go through, right? It's this, at first it's like, wow, are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? And then it goes to, how dare they? I can't believe they would do something like that. And so the interesting question becomes, so was it generosity? Because we're suddenly getting really upset because we're not hearing back from something that we did that was good. And here's what I learned, which is the moment we need to receive appreciation for the good that we do, it no longer is generosity. We've actually transactionalized the relationship.
That is so true. It's so true. And then we start thinking so many emotions into it, and uncertainties, and like you said, I mean, bad feelings perhaps. So completely. It's so interesting when you think about that. We just started a GoFundMe for my new project, and there was a $750 donation that was unanimous. I mean, they didn't tell me who it was. I couldn't see the name, and so I love when people want to do that specifically and know that they don't want any thank you back. Man, I mean, it's powerful.
But it lives differently, because here's what happens is, when the moment we start to feel this need, like we need to be acknowledged for the good that we do. Now, I get on the one hand, you can say it's just good etiquette, which I agree. I totally agree. And on the other side here, there's this experience of when that doesn't happen, right, for a number of reasons, that we can start to feel like, well, the next time there is to give somebody a gift or to be generous or to do something, we start to think, well, last time I did that, it didn't go as well. I'm going to do a little bit less this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just going to do a little less this time. And then I'm just going to do a little less this time. Oh, I'm just going to send him a gift card. I'm just going to send him a card. I'm just going to send him a text message. I'm just not even going to call him. Like, that's literally the distance that we go from the moment we don't get appreciation. And it starts to affect how we engage in a lot of relationships, especially people who are in sales or in business. I mean, this permeates everything. It becomes this whole experience of like, well, what have you done for me lately? When was the last referral you sent me? How much did I make in that last deal? Oh, well, I haven't heard anything from you in a while. I'm not going to do anything for this thing that you're working on. And we start to really conditionalize our relationships. And we can totally do that. There's nothing wrong. And I would actually say that's how most business it gets. But when you are, and this is, I think, one of the issues I was dealing with internally, Amy, is that I was running a very successful business, but they were all transactional relationships. And when that, and when you know that your relationship is contingent upon your ability to produce or create something for someone else in their business, you start to question, well, are we really close? Are we really friends? Is this actually genuine? And so what was fascinating is it became this required practice for me to play generously literally every day, no matter what. And it was a breakthrough that I had about month 3, because about month 3, I had this, like, I was getting pissed. I'm like, does no one care? I'm literally, I've gotten like, 30 thank yous back after sending 300 thank you cards. This is insane. And then I had to check my heart and really ask myself, what was the goal? What was the intention? My wife has this great question she'll ask our boys whenever they're bickering or fighting. And she just asks them, where was your heart? Where was your heart when you did what you did? Because if our heart is, I want to do this and then hear something back or get something back, well, then don't be surprised if you don't. And then now you're putting yourself up to be set up to be upset if they don't respond back, versus purely playing generously. And the moment, Amy, the moment I let that go, I let go the need to receive credit or appreciation or hear anything, it was like this weight lifted off, and this whole nother level of generosity showed up, because I wasn't doing it to get something back, because I knew that just wasn't going to happen. And so I had then to decide, I'm going to play generously no matter what, even if I don't hear anything back. That is life-changing, because then that bleeds into everything else that you do in your life, your business, your relationships.
It completely does. And I think that we can look at the entire world, every relationship that we're in. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see just so many, like you said, transitional or transactional relationships happening in marriages, friendships, business. I mean, you name it. It's almost this, you do for me, I'll do for you. But if you don't, I'm not there. And it's just, it makes everything just, I think, stripped of that beautiful relationship and that beautiful intentionality of just being a good person. And, I think in those moments, I catch myself doing that sometimes. And I did it for so many years. And then I got, I think, upset maybe because I didn't receive things back. And then I think, like you said, it brings, like you said, that next level of generosity and the way that you feel when you're not expecting those things back. And I think if we can just mention that to people each and every day, that it's okay not to receive anything back. I mean, how you feel that you felt when you sent it is the way that you need to continue to think. And that's all that needs to be done.
Yeah. So here is the interesting thing that I'll bring the story about my mom here now. So in this whole process of writing all these cards, and I said to all my family, including my parents, neither of my parents said anything back either. Now, granted, my father was relatively unable to, because he was pretty far along with his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And so my mom was basically taking full-time care of him back in our home of San Diego, California. So and he'd had it for over 10 years at this point, like close to 15 years. So he was basically bedridden at this point. I went to go visit my family. My kids are sleeping on the couch. I'm having dad's asleep in bed. I'm having a late night conversation with my mom at the dinner table. And she just looks at me with just this like brokenness and says, John, I got your thank you card months ago, and I so wanted to appreciate it, but I couldn't because I'm in so much pain here taking care of your dad by myself. I didn't have any space to be grateful for anything. And that was a heartbreaking thing to hear.
Yeah.
And it also became this interesting discussion of realizing. So when I say that comment of, how do you treat that for which you're grateful? Because what my mom needed at that time wasn't a thank you card. What she needed was help. And so this isn't a gratitude and appreciation aren't a Band-Aid for a bad relationship.
Yeah.
And so for the first time, I think I actually listened to my mom since I can remember, because, teenagers aren't great with listening to their parents. And so I just said, hey, Mom, what do you need? How can I help? She says, hey, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. She says, hey, I would love if all of you at some point could come and just watch Dad for a week so that I can get away and do something or not have to worry about taking care of him. And I said, you got it. No question about it. We'll work it out. Now, all of the siblings live in different areas. We all have families. We all have jobs that we'd have to take a week off of work. So this wasn't an easy task, but it was like such a deep need that I got everyone on a conference call. And I said, hey, who can take what weeks? When are you going to come? I took the second to last shift. I got to go spend a whole week with my dad, taking him to therapies, brought my kids with me. My final sister went, and he passed away that weekend.
Wow.
And while I'm not happy that we had to go through all that, I'm really grateful for the lessons, because it allowed me to really understand that for us to truly appreciate another person, you can't just do it with your words. It often needs to happen by showing up for them. And that was something that was pretty life-changing as somebody who is good with their words. I am a salesperson by trade. I am a public speaker by trade. I can make people feel really good and write great thank you notes and acknowledge people publicly. But, I had this really funny visual the other day. I don't know if you can relate with this, but my wife was literally holding one of our babies. We have a 3-year-old right now. She's holding her 3-year-old while cooking bacon in the other hand. Right. So I want you to imagine if she just looked stressed out. So if I were to just say, sweetheart, I love you. You're doing so great in that moment. What do you think she would have done?
Probably looked with an evil eye at you.
Right. Yeah. No. So what's the correct thing to do? Say, hey, can I help you?
Can I help you?
Take one of those things. But we do this all the time in our businesses, in our relationships with our teams. We think that sometimes gratitude or appreciation or a nice gift is going to patch up a really terrible engagement process we've had with this other individual. And so, and I think one of the biggest lessons that came out of this is really understanding to help people be seen, heard, and valued and respected. And so for someone to be respected, it's not just acknowledging them and appreciating them. That is a huge part if it's not in existence. But some people are so far from that starting line, they just need help. And when you give them help, then that door opens up for appreciation. Then they start to feel like they matter. Then you can go to those next layers of the relationship.
Yep. And I have to say this. You sound like my good friend, Amber Vilhauer. Do you know Amber?
We know of each other. We haven't really spent a lot of time together. But.
Oh my God. So if she watches this podcast, she is just literally going to be like, oh my goodness. It is our mission, like, to make sure that people are seen, heard, valued. There's these, adjectives that come afterwards, and respected. And mine has been this empowered. And she and I go back and forth and what we want to, do for people. And we want to, help everybody. I love that. And I'm going to send her to this podcast, because she will just be smiling, because it's the gift that we hope to just continue to give. And I love that you said that, because it's huge. And we try to teach our children that. And I don't know if some of these values are just being lost. And so I think that there are a few individuals out there that are still touting it at the highest mountaintop. So I love that you said that, because it is. And I think even the best intentions can be just kind of thrown back in our face. And then we have resistance of, oh gosh, well, that didn't work, so I'm just not going to do anything from now on. So
Well, yeah, and you hit on something there because the threat to gratitude is not entitlement. The threat to gratitude is busyness.
mhm. Yeah.
We're too busy to take the time. And by the way, this was another kind of breakthrough moment where I had been sending all these cards, and actually one of my friends sent me one back, right, to say, hey, thanks for the card, man, it meant so much, and here's what I think about you. It was a really thoughtful, meaningful card. It happened to be in a very busy season of that year for me,
Mhm.
and so I just didn't respond. Like I totally had the best intentions to, but I forgot. So a week later, he messaged me and said, "Hey, just want to check, did you get my card in the mail?" And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Now we shouldn't have to be doing that for people. Nor do I necessarily even recommend doing that. But I think that it was such a great eye opener to be like, okay, there wasn't anything wrong with him or me. I just was busy and I meant to, and I forgot. But that's kind of how life is right now. We're so busy. We don't create the space to actually truly appreciate and enjoy life. And I think that's been, when I say this homestead thing this is a real manifestation of the project in a big different way, because instead of just writing all these cards, which I still do periodically, it's really about, am I truly living a grateful life? Do the people I know that I appreciate them and value them? Am I taking the time to enjoy the life that I've worked so hard to create? And so yesterday was a great example. We had a long family day, just like church and then Costco and then cleaning the car and all these things. We have 4 kids, right? And last night, I knew my wife needed about an hour to put away all the groceries she bought. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to take our 3-year-old. And she loves playing with rocks. And so we sat in our long driveway and I played with rocks for 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no sounds really outside of some birds chirping, and the sun was setting, and I got myself a Topo Chico and just sat there and just let myself actually enjoy my life.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't normally have taken that because there's so much how I grew up, which is to be a driver. I grew up pretty poor. So making money was very important to me because I didn't want to have a life that struggled like I did growing up. And so there's this feeling of when I'm not working, there's this agitation that you feel. I have a name for it. We call it productivity shame, where it's this unsettled pit in your stomach you feel when you take any time off.
Yep.
And just battling that is still a challenge to this day, but I'm grateful for the moments I remember, because then I'm actually getting to enjoy it. And then the next day when I go up to work, like today is a great freaking day. So
I think, man, there's so many important things, and I don't want to pull this back on my story, but I do want to put a few little pieces in here. So kind of start with a couple of talking points. Intentionality, being intentional, I think is one of the most important things that, I talk about in my podcast and I talked about in my book, and also being grateful. I remember when my daughter was diagnosed with malignant liver cancer at age 3, we were placed into the system, and I call it a system for a really good reason. The next morning when I woke up, kind of that internal alarm clock went off about 4:30. Got up, went across the hallway to the coffee area, little tiny coffee area, and there was this gentleman there, and I asked him, why are you in here? Kind of like we were in a jail cell, which is kind of what it felt like. And he was telling me about his child was diagnosed with cancer at about age 3, same age as my daughter, and he had been in remission for several years, and they were back again. He was diagnosed with brain cancer.
Oof.
Brain tumor. And I remember, and he didn't say much more. Real tall guy. I could pick him out of a lineup. It's very interesting, the things that our brain remembers. And I remember he walked out of the room and just tears flooding down my face. And I remember, and I talk about it in my book, that moment, I remember thinking, I have nothing to feel sorry about. I have to be grateful and find something to be grateful for every single day. And I have to count my blessings. And I believe, and I didn't believe it at the moment. And like I told you before we were on the call, I had to look back in a different perspective through different lenses to see things totally different. And I had always been that person that sent thank you letters, and I was so happy. And I was always just happy-go-lucky person. And, once my daughter was diagnosed, it really changed the trajectory of our life. And I think going through the valley of death for many people out there that are listening today, and to all of my podcasts that I've said, I mean, I don't sugarcoat much of anything because I don't think life is necessary to sugarcoat it, because, the valley of death is going to land on your doorstep in some fashion within life. And I think just being able to be grateful and count your blessings, and then being really intentional with the things that you do, are just so, so important. And I remember those people that were there and did show up, and then those people throughout that just kept showing up and being there. And it's something that I get to pass on now as kind of recommendations, and I don't know, just kind of those wisdom pieces. And so I know it's kind of off the topic, but it's this, yes, you can be thankful and grateful. And I think that, having that gratitude and generosity is huge. But I think also, like you had stated with the story of your mother, I mean, that hits us all. I mean, I don't think there's one person out there today that can, say that they haven't been through that type of situation. And I think that type of advice and what you gave is 100% something that we need to write on a sticky note, put it in our car, put it on our bathroom mirror. I mean, just being able to be that person, it's absolutely huge. But I think this mind frame that we need to have and how we need to live our life is huge. I can relate to, and I think many people might be able to relate. I've done the same thing. You send a thank you letter, you do something nice, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, should I reach out? And you reach out, or at least I have, and ask that, did you receive that? Did you realize I did that? Like in that moment of that day, I'm like, I just feel like I'm in the trenches and I need somebody to pick me up. And I'm going to ask that person to give me some really good, encouraging words because I did something nice and didn't hear back. And if you hear back, I remember a couple of specific times, like it was just like this one sentence, like, yes, I received it. And I remember just feeling, okay, well, I didn't really need that. I think I feel worse now than I did before. But yet, when I saw the person, I remember one specific person, I saw them then years later, and they're like, thank you so much. That meant the world to me. And I was like, do you know how much I beat myself up for so long thinking that you didn't appreciate that? So I'm on a tangent, so I'm going to take a step back. But I think making sure that we don't put those things in our head of, somebody didn't appreciate it, making sure we're just humble and intentional with, what we give is huge. I mean, I honestly do. I think just being able to make it through whatever we're going through, whether it's X, Y, Z, I mean, whatever, we need to really remember that. And I think that that's just, like I said, grab yourself sticky notes. I'm the sticky note girl. I actually kill many trees with all my sticky notes, but like put them everywhere. And just those little reminders, I think they're huge. They're so important.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that was to kind of allude to what you're talking about as we relate to busyness and overwhelm, and I don't take that lightly, that busyness is the enemy of gratitude, because when you go into the research, so here's the interesting thing that I learned with gratitude and its relation to happiness, right? So gratitude and happiness are actually two distinct things. You don't have to teach a child how to be happy, but you do need to teach them how to be grateful. Because happiness is like kind of a natural reaction to a stimulus or an experience. It's a positive emotion, right? Gratitude is a reflective state that you actually have control over. So the best definition of the word gratitude is the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. Makes sense because, in the gifting world, right? If someone gives you a gift unexpectedly, you didn't do anything for it, but it's something that's super meaningful to you. You open it, that emotion, that joy, whatever that is, that's gratitude. The other part of this is the experience of something as a gift. So this is kind of a silly story, but I think it illustrates the point really well. So I'm from I went to a small university called Gonzaga University up in Washington State. Are you familiar with Gonzaga?
No, but I remember reading it on your profile. Mm-hmm.
So we're mostly known. It's a small school, about 3,000 undergraduate, 5,000 with a law school, and I went there from San Diego, California. I needed to escape California for school. So, anyways, I go there, small school, but we're known for one big thing, which is basketball. We have one of the best basketball programs in the nation, and so this year during the project, 2017. The school, my university, makes it to the NCAA national championship. So huge deal. Everybody's watching. I'm on the couch. My kids are there with their little Gonzaga onesies on. We're ready to go, cheering for our team. And we're winning most of the game until 90 seconds left. We lose. Our star player had the worst game of his entire career in the national championship. We lose to the UNC Tar Heels. And it's interesting, Amy, I'm not a huge sports person, but I always thought it was interesting at the end of a Super Bowl, they would show the downtown of the winning team and the losing team. The winning team's like confetti in the air and everyone's celebrating. The losing team is like people are flipping over cars and lighting trash cans on fire. And I never understood it until that day, because I was so upset. My team, my baby, lost the biggest game in school history. This is awful. And it's 9:00 at night. My wife puts our kids to bed. And I go to my office, I lay my thank you cards out because I haven't written any yet for the day, but I have to, or I've got to pay $1,000 to a charity. So I was in this crazy experience because, Amy, I couldn't do it. I was so upset that my team lost the biggest game. I couldn't harness an ounce of gratitude. So it begets a really interesting question that I had to answer. And this is one of the most powerful things I had to learn throughout this year, which is, how do you be grateful when you don't feel like it? And so that's where this definition of gratitude comes in, because when you think of experiencing something as a gift, we can all go back and look at maybe a terrible memory, maybe the first time that we were in love and the relationship ended, right? That moment, what is that person feeling? That teenager, that 20-year-old, whatever it is, it's anger, it's upset, it's shame. That shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have said that. We're all wrapped up into it. Right? Gratitude, non-existent, right? However, years later, with time and perspective, we can look back on that previously painful experience and we can say, I'm actually really glad that happened. I'm so glad that happened because of all the things that I learned that I couldn't have learned without going through that. I'm so glad that happened because I wound up meeting somebody that I married and had a family with. So I'm really grateful for that. So I can look back on this previously painful experience and feel really like sincere gratitude in this moment. So the question becomes, how long does it take us to feel gratitude from a previously painful experience? And the answer is as long as it takes you to find the gift.
Yep.
In every life experience, there's a gift. But it is your job to find it. And my experience of this was wild in that moment because I'm sitting there at my desk, racking my brain. Where is the gift? Where is the good? This is a terrible experience, but there's something good here. And it was like a light bulb goes off. It was like, oh my gosh, I didn't watch my team lose the national championship. You know what I just watched? I just watched arguably the best team in my school's history play the game of basketball. This deserves to be celebrated. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a handwritten card to every single player of the entire Gonzaga basketball team and the entire coaching staff. So I'm looking up everybody's names. I spent an entire week, it's about 35 people. I'm spending hours a day finding people's specific like newsreels and highlights when they had their best games of the year so that every card was hyper specific, even to the redshirts who didn't play that year, to say, hey, championship teams are not made in the championship game. They're made in every practice that led up to it. So thank you for helping our team be the best in school history. And Amy, it was insane. It didn't take months or weeks or even days. I'm talking minutes from upset, anger, this shouldn't be happening, to feeling pure and authentic joy and meaning it. To a point when people, sometimes when your team loses the big game, the next day at work, people are like, oh, sorry to hear about your zag. Sorry to hear about whatever. And it's like, oh, don't talk about it. Don't remind me. But when people say that, be like, hey, the best season in school history, and really feeling it. So here's the crazy thing that happened. 2 months go by. I forget I even do this. On May 21st, of all days, my birthday, I'm out to dinner with my wife. She pulls an envelope out of her purse and says, oh, by the way, this showed up for you in the mail today. And it's addressed from Gonzaga men's basketball. And I open it up, and inside is a handwritten card from Mark Few, the head coach of Gonzaga men's basketball.
Wow.
Now, Amy, if you don't know, Mark was also one of the head coaches of the U.S. men's Olympic team this year that led them to a gold medal.
Wow.
And he wrote me a thank you card for all the letters of appreciation that I sent the entire team. I still have that. It's for anyone who's watching the video. Behind me, you'll see what looks like maybe I'm tracking a serial killer. It's not. It's actually a bunch of thank you cards. Whenever I get them from people, because if you write 1,800 thank you cards, you do get some back. So
I was going to ask you what that was. I'm so glad you told me and told us.
So this is the letter from Mark Few. Guy makes millions of dollars, has all the biggest sponsorships on the planet, and of everything he could do with his time, he chose to spend it sending me a random fan, a random alumni, a thank you card, just appreciating me for the time, the effort that I put into thanking the team and how meaningful it was for them to show up to receive that. You know, Amy, I couldn't have paid this guy to do that. And I think that's what makes this so powerful, especially for those who are in leadership roles, who are powerful people who sometimes feel like, oh, it's not worth my time, or I'm so busy. Well, yeah, we know you're busy. That's why if somebody receives a personalized thank you letter or acknowledgement or a gift or a call from you, it is so meaningful because they know you could have spent your time doing anything else. And I think, by the way, this is like a real meta. This took me like actually a few years to really grasp. I think what became so powerful in understanding this process was that true gratitude, and when you acknowledge someone and appreciate them, is acknowledging that every human being is at choice. And with their life, they can choose to do anything with their time. But they chose to do something meaningful and useful to you. And when we acknowledge that, what happens is we encourage those people to go forth and do that again. And there is scientific evidence that shows when people are acknowledged and appreciated for something that they do, they want to go do it again. So by not acknowledging the good things in our life, we are setting ourselves up for them to go away. Because people are busy. But when we take the time to appreciate people for the things that they do, they desire to do it again and again. So actually, you do build yourself a happier life by appreciating what you have, because the good things want to show back again and again and again.
I agree with that. And I'm going to take it a little step further. I think we've kind of stepped into this, but I want the audience to really listen to this and pay attention to what John and I are talking about here too. When you are intentional, there is something that happens, and you take that moment to step back and just be appreciative. There's something that happens, I think, within us, and we realize at those moments, and John, you can agree, and the audience out there, you know, if you're not driving, be very careful if you're behind the wheel. Just like think of those people in those moments where you're like, I need to reach out to that person. I need to thank that person, or something pops in your mind and you don't do it. I remember reading some studies recently of what people regretted the most. The thing that people regret the most in life above anything else. And I think this was also on one of my favorite radio stations. It's called Joy FM. It's a Christian station. They're just phenomenal. And they had reiterated this. It was like that pivotal moment that I was like, wow, I think that's true. Is people are regretting, and they regret, number one, of not reaching out to people and not saying thank you, and not just reaching out to see how they're doing, but thanking them, being intentional, doing something. And so I just really challenge everybody today to kind of just dig deep and think about who that person or those people might be. And I mean, John, yours, that is a great goal. I mean, I'm a salesperson through and through for 30 some years of my entire life. I, started owning businesses when I was 15, and sales was the huge thing. So if you can do 5 a day, great. If you can do 1 a day, set yourself a goal. But I think that is truly amazing. And if you get that thought in your mind of somebody that really comes to your mind, and maybe just send them a thank you card, it will change the trajectory of their day, their week, their month. And I keep always pulling it back to this. You don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know what they're dealing with. And that thank you card on that moment, that day, could literally be a thank you for something that happened, but also change something that they're currently going through to just, I don't know, change that moment in their life. And I have been witness to that so many times. So I think that these thank yous and appreciations and gratitude have so much more impact that we don't even realize could be there. Just send it. Just send it. But like you said, I mean, I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of thank you cards, and I just love them. And I pick them out depending upon kind of who I'm sending them to, and make it fun. Do something really overly intentional, and just, if they like animals or they like, just make it however you want. But I think just, I don't know, maybe challenge people today to start handwriting some thank you letters is what we need to do.
Yeah, well, and so kind of a funny fact with that was one of the beautiful things I saw my wife do. I didn't do this, but I thought it was pretty cool. She did this when she would write some cards. She would, how did she do it? It was like she drew a tree, and then the branches with like all the leaves on it, she would write a word of like generous, patient, and she would use words of when she thought about that person, like what would come up. And then she would write the card on the other side of the page, which I thought was kind of really neat. So just to go with what you're talking about. And if I had to challenge people here, I would say, hey, simplest thing to do is to just do a 30-day challenge. If you go to my website, mrthankyou.com, on the front thing you can put your email in, and you can download our 30-day challenge, and it'll give you some prompts of who to write them to, how to write your cards. I give my framework for writing a really good thank you note. And my challenge to you on this is really, and ultimately what happened, by the way, just to kind of get to the end of the story, is, I finished my year-long project, and by the end of the year, I had just all these people who had heard about it that had started their own thank you projects. I started to see this ripple happening out in the world of all these thank you cards going out and the impact that it was having. And it reminded me of a moment back when I was in college. I was in my ecology class, which is a study of the environment. And this teacher came in and he was talking, he asked a question. He said, do you know what would happen if all the bodies of water on planet Earth elevated by 1 degree Celsius or Fahrenheit? No one answered. And he said, it's not good. And then he goes into this whole conversation about global warming and about how we're impacting the environment, and, kind of spurred on this whole recycling program we did with the school. And I always remember that, because I thought, well, that's a 1 degree difference in the negative. What if we could do something in the positive? What if we could inspire, an elevation of gratitude 1% on the planet? And that's where kind of the mission of the Mr. Thank You Project, if you see my book, the front of it says, elevating the level of gratitude on the planet 1 card at a time. Because that's our mission. Our mission is to inspire 74 million thank you projects around the world, because that's effectively 1% of the world's population. So I love hearing feedback from people who are like, hey, I started my challenge. I sent this card out. Here's what I heard back. Here's what happened. Here's what's changed in my business. And it's amazing to hear, what occurs for people. And my real challenge, everybody, is probably this final story I'll share with you, which is about 4 months into the project. I'm sitting at my desk. My best friend, Nick, calls me. Nick was my best man at my wedding. We grew up together, known each other forever. His parents were like my parents. They drove us to dances and cool stuff in high school. And so very meaningful family to me. Unfortunately, Nick was calling to tell me that his father had just passed away, which was terrible news. No one likes to hear that. What made it worse, Amy, is that I had written Nick's dad a thank you card during the project, and I hadn't sent it yet. It was sitting on my desk while Nick was telling me the news. Wow. And while I'm not happy that happened, I am grateful for the lesson, which is the urgency of what we're talking about. Because one of the greatest fallacies in relationships is the assumption that they'll be there tomorrow. Because we never know when will be the last time we'll get to thank somebody who's positively impacted our lives. And so if that's the only thing you do is a 30-day challenge, and you make a list of everybody who's positively impacted your life, and you make it an effort for 1 year or for 1 month to just thank all of those people. And by the way, some of them might be hard to get their mailing address. Maybe you send them an email. I'm not religious that it has to be a handwritten card. I don't particularly care, but did you get the message? I had one guy that I tracked down so that I could physically in person read him my thank you card. It was actually one of my old high school teachers that almost kicked me out of school because I was kind of a punk kid when I was in high school, but he challenged me to be a better man. And I'll never forget that, because that literally changed my life when I was 14, 15 years old. And so I went back to the high school where he was now teaching at, and I got to in person personally thank him. And we both cried, and we're both just like overly emotional. And I think what's really cool is, Amy, both you and I we've had our own share of trauma, as probably every person who's listened, because if you're a human being, you live on earth, you're going to get hurt emotionally in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And so here was the really powerful thing, is that while we've got so many things that we can look back on and say, hey, this in some ways kind of defined me, this really impacted me in a negative way. And some people, I think, give a little bit too much volume to that part of their life.
Yeah.
But if we allow ourselves to step back and look at all the amazing people that were there to support us along the way, you actually start to fill the void, and you start to cloud out the noise of all the things that didn't go well for you. And you realize that, man, I've actually lived a pretty damn good life. And there's always something to be grateful for, as long as you're looking for it.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. And for, those that are out there, and today is a hard day for you, things are just not going well. Maybe you're sick, somebody is sick. Honestly, if I can do it, I think anybody can do it. If I can do it from the depths of the hospital, cancer diagnosis to my 3-year-old, and the next morning waking up going, I have nothing to feel sorry about. I have to find something to be grateful for every single day. And there was not one day in 10 years that I didn't have that as a sticky note. What am I grateful for today? And there were days I didn't want to be grateful. I almost couldn't be grateful. I'm even tearing up now thinking of all those days. But John, I agree. I think that one of the things that got me through the hardest times of my life was to be grateful, and just getting my mind off of what I was dealing with, and being grateful to others, and being grateful and thankful and counting my blessings. And it can honestly, it will improve your health. It will improve everything about your entire life. Is just that grateful experience. And I think what it does to the mind, the body, the soul, the brain, to others. Just if you can live in those moments, and then, if you go over like I did, and I'd be in the corner just crying, and then pull my big girl pants up and be like, I'm not going to be like this. And, just, we're going to have bad days and good days, but this is huge. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with some hard things right now. And if you can take this lesson and this fun, passion, and mission and challenge, whatever you feel best calling it, I think that the Thank You Project could be on fire moving forward with people who just maybe didn't feel it was possible, and they were able to look through different lenses with a different perspective and find that gratitude, even in those moments of just utter and complete despair or uncertainty or sadness. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was one point to hit on to really kind of highlight this, especially if you, I'll just kind of share what happens. So I speak at all sorts of different stuff. Sometimes I'll do local charity events for free, and I'll just, do a gig for the Rotary Club or whatever. And there was a woman who came up, and she ran a charity for widowed mothers and their children. So she runs a retreat once or twice a year, invites them out to this campgrounds, and it's one of those things that whenever we're connected, we always love to go somewhere and we can connect about something. We all have something in common. We find it. It's really hard to connect, especially when the only thing you have to connect about is that you've all lost one of the most important people in your life, which is your husband or your father. Mm-hmm. So she asked me if I would be willing to speak, and I said, how do you say no to widows and their children, right? So I'm like, yeah, of course I'll be there. So I come over and I speak, and I do my kind of a shortened version of my keynote, because this is a unique audience. There was anything from 1-year-old kids to 20-year-old college students to mothers of all ages. Again, all the thing they had in common is that they had all lost their father. And so, I share my message, and it was good. And then we do Q&A, and I'll never forget this moment. A young girl, probably about 17, stands up, and she says, so how do I find the gift in my dad dying? Room goes silent. Because it was everybody's question. That's kind of why we're here.
Mhm.
And I took a beat and I said, it's a great question, because when you even consider asking it, it almost feels disrespectful, doesn't it? That there could be a gift in the passing of your
Mhm.
father. Like, we don't even want to ask it because we feel that would be
Mhm.
disrespectful to their life.
Yeah.
And I'm not even asking you to find the gift right now. And it might not be a significant thing, but here's what I can tell you is that sometimes a gift shows up in a skill that you're going to have to learn to develop to support your family that most kids your age will never have to develop.
Yeah.
It might show up in the fact that you have a closer community and family connection now than you maybe did before he passed, which is going to really serve you and them in a lot of ways in the future. I'm not asking you to find the gift right now. I'm just asking you to be open that it will show up one day, and to allow yourself to feel gratitude, not for your dad's passing, but because of the gift that he gave you, and how much better you are as a person, and how much better your life is because of what the death allowed you to experience or grow in.
Mhm.
And it was like, we're going to end with that.
Mhm.
Because it was, every mom came up afterwards and was like, thank you. That was exactly what my kids needed to hear today, because that's the hardest thing is we don't want to feel good about this because this is awful. And it is. I couldn't imagine what that'd be like to lose my wife. But I also think that everything else there is true. And I think sometimes, part of your show here is about hope and advocacy, right? And so that's kind of what hope is. Hope is really this belief that somehow the future can be better than the past or the present moment. And if we can cling on to that, I think that's at the minimum what I hope people grasp from that experience, is that there is hope, that there will be light in the future. You don't have to be super pumped that you lost somebody. It's not like, oh, somebody lost their dog, so you send them a card and said, well, hey, at least you don't have to worry about buying dog food anymore. Like, that's pretty
Mhm.
insensitive.
Yeah.
Sure, that's also true. That's also true.
It's
But
awesome.
I think we can all agree it's a little insensitive. So I think that we
Mhm.
can also realize that gifts can show up in a lot of different ways, and that we just need to remain open that might show up. And then when that does, that we just give ourselves the grace and the space to feel that gratitude and appreciation in that moment. And I think that's actually something that whoever we've lost would really be grateful for, that we got out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And, we were talking about the loss of our friend, before we jumped on
Yeah.
the podcast. And I think that it's really tough, no matter what age, no matter who it is, no matter, what is happening. It is tough. And everybody's going to go through, their period of, trying to figure it out. I can only imagine, being in that room and getting up there to speak. And I can't even imagine, that question coming across the room, and I'm sure it just laid on everybody. But yeah, great answer, and I think that's perfect for people to remember. I mean, there is hope through everything. God doesn't take us to these moments of darkness and gray and uncertainty for no reason. And I think if we can keep that in our bellies and in the back of our minds and know that and just look for it and have those moments where you allow yourself to sit in silence and just understand it and find it, is what we all deserve to give ourselves, and it will come. But that's, man, what a story, what a moment. I'm sure what an entire event that probably was for you and everybody else. Wow.
Yeah. And I think that the takeaway with that as well is to also get that, um, my message can also get landed in the universe of toxic positivity, which is just this feeling like always feel good, don't feel bad. I don't think that's healthy. And I think that there's a whole chapter in the book that I wrote called Emotional Intelligence and Gratitude, because one of the things that I was required to do during this year is, if I don't feel good, I've got to be with it. I've got to deal with it. I've got to engage it, not like cover it up and just say, oh, well, we're gonna muscle through this one and be grateful, because you can't sometimes, and you don't need to. But I don't think that we need to sit there and ruminate on our negative emotions. I think that, I didn't have anything severely traumatic that happened that year, but I do know the following year, after I'd written the book and did the project, I remember when my wife had a miscarriage. Man, I was deeply depressed for like a week. It was just awful. Um, and I wasn't ready to find the gift in that experience at that time. But I can say that I can find the gifts that came from it. You know, I was able to see how well my community showed up, how great of a relationship I had with my clients because I had to tell them I had to take some time off, and to see how my team showed up and supported during that time. Like, I'm really grateful that I got to learn those things. Again, still, I don't have to be grateful that something happened, but I can find some gifts in the experience. And it's okay to sit with pain and suffering and struggle for a little while. But I think that it's also our choice to stay there. You know, we don't need to. Part of our life is to live it, to enjoy life with those around us. And if someone's just negative all the time and complains all the time, honestly, it's just hard to be around. So we need to take responsibility for our struggles and our challenges and find resolution. It doesn't need to be immediate, but I think that's part of our responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's in store for you the rest of the year, moving into next year? Like what's going on? What's coming up? What can you let people know about?
Yeah. So now I'm predominantly a keynote speaker. So I work with companies, organizations, and depending on, the group, I'm speaking on gratitude as a competitive advantage. How does this show up to help you build resilience during challenging times? I mean, that's the big message right now in the marketplace is people are experiencing stress, anxiety, and overwhelm more than they've ever experienced. And so I come in with a message that is positive, that's going to bring perspective and with tactical tools of things they can go do that actually have proven psychologically to elevate their well-being so they can do their best work, create better relationships, and grow their business, or to, at a minimum, be in a better position by the end of this challenging time that they're going through. And so that's what I'm really grateful to get to do virtually every single week. So I probably do about 50 speaking engagements a year. And so we're pretty busy. I was actually out in Missouri. I won't necessarily name names on the podcast, but I spoke for a few of the hospitals in Missouri. I'm sure you can ask me about afterwards. But people are struggling, they're stressed out. And if my message can support them, I'd love to do that. And inside of that, we still have our gifting business. I still do a lot of client experience coaching and consulting if organizations want to grow in their client experience to create because a grateful client is one who refers the most and comes back the most. We still do a lot of that work as well. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm raising chickens in a family. That's it. That's on my calendar the rest of the year.
What did you say, 66 chickens? Is that right?
Yeah.
4 kids. Wow, man. That's incredible. I think that, just being able to use the gratitude as a competitive advantage is huge. I think every company out there needs it. I think everybody in this world needs it. So that's phenomenal. So people can find you at, you said your website, mrthankyou.com. Is that correct?
mrthankyou.com. And then on social media, I've changed my handle. So I used to, so it is johnisrael.me, John Israel, like the country, ISRAEL.me. I have to say, there's another Mr. Thank You on the planet who's like this Russian playboy who takes pictures of him giving away money to strangers. It's fake, but he's garnered millions of followers, and it's interesting. So you'll notice it's going to be either pictures of me with my family and chickens, or someone throwing money in the air while they're driving a jet ski. So I'm sure you'll probably be able to figure out who's who. So
I love it. Oh my goodness, John, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing the gratitude, the inspiration. It's wonderful to kind of hear the backstory. I'm so thankful to just kind of be able to take that journey with you and know where it came from, and that your wife and you and your family and you were able to get on, that same page and kind of the things that happened. So I don't know, for everybody out there, I'm going to put it, start a mission, start a challenge, whatever sounds best to you, and write those thank you cards. Write those, reach out to people, just, be there for them, be intentional, set those moments aside. And I guarantee you how you feel at the end of each day or the beginning of each day, whenever you're writing them, is going to make you feel probably completely different than how you have felt. And, document that and see what happens and see the feedback. And if you don't get any feedback, that's okay too. But I can't wait to kind of see what happens. I think the challenge is great. I think I'll start the challenge. I need to start writing those thank you cards again. I get out of that habit, but It's awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. And everybody get out there and, follow John, take a look at his website, see what he's doing, grab him as a keynote speaker, bring some life and some energy and some gratitude into your company or your group, and see how it changes your day. So thank you guys. We really appreciate you. I always appreciate your time. It's wonderful being able to reach out to you, just bring positivity and resources to you. So thank you so much. And thank you, John. And everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. All right.